Dear learners, so far we have discussed the meaning, nature, definition, significance, and the classification of human rights. After that, we also discussed the evolution of the concept of human rights from Magna Carta to International Bill of Rights. While dealing with the Magna Carta and the International Bill of Rights, or what we call the Western tradition of human rights, we also pointed out that human rights have been there in all the civilizations and cultures of the world. So it means that it is not the monopoly of the West, or it is not the monopoly of the Western countries. So human rights, in some form or the other, they have been there in all the traditions of the world. And that's why the non-Western tradition of human rights becomes important. What we are trying to do here, that we will try to trace this the origin of Western, non-Western tradition of human rights, and then we will try to know how it has contributed to the literature of human rights. So here we go. First of all, what we have to understand, that the human rights may be universal, or human rights may have got a concrete shape in the Western events and revolutions, but at the same time they have been there in all the civilizations, traditions, and cultures of the world. Another important aspect of this lecture will be understanding the universalism and versus cultural relativism debate, whether all human rights are universal or some rights are culture specific. In the non-Western tradition, of course, there are many traditions. For example, African tradition of human rights. You will find Latin American traditions of human rights. Uh, you see the Chinese tradition of human rights. But here we are going to discuss only three important traditions of human rights. Number one is, and that will be Indian perspective, of course, and that is number one is the contribution of Hinduism as a spiritual tradition to the literature of human rights. Then we will discuss the Buddhist tradition of human rights, and after that we will discuss the Islamic tradition of human rights. In the light of these three traditions of human rights, we will try to understand how they have contributed to what is called the universal human right that we have today. As we discussed in our previous lectures, that the contemporary discourse on human rights has largely been shaped by Western philosophical and legal traditions. There is no doubt in it that the contemporary discourse on human rights that we have today, it was shaped in the West, and that is why we have discussed from Magna Carta to the French Revolution or Glorious Revolution of England, American War of Independence, then Bolshevik Revolution of Russia. We have discussed, and then we found the International Bill of Rights that was adopted by the United Nations. So that contribution of the West cannot be underestimated, and that is why we have already highlighted. But when we talk of Western tradition of human rights, you'll also find in the literature of political science, and in the human rights, there is a debate, and that can be called the Great Debate, and that is universalism versus cultural relativism. And here the question is whether all human rights that have been developed under the aegis of the United Nations, or what we discussed, International Bill of Rights, are all these human rights, or the rights that were claimed in the great revolutions of Europe or in the American War of Independence, are they universal? Can they be applied on all societies, on cultures, all countries? Can we say that these human rights, means civil and political rights, economic, social, and cultural rights that were developed in the West, are they the parameter to judge the performance of the states in the global South, or what we call the countries, Muslim countries, or African countries, many countries? And that is the debate. You will find that the scholars and the people are divided. There are scholars and people who say that the rights that have been proclaimed in the International Bill of Rights, or most of the rights that are being, the instruments of human rights that are being developed under the aegis of the United Nations, they all are universal. On the other hand, there are countries who feel uncomfortable with many of these rights. They have the rights that have been mentioned either in the UDHR or in the ICCPR, ICSCR, and many other covenants and treaties that are coming into existence today. And they say that all human rights are not universal. There are certain human rights that cannot be implemented without the peril of a civil war like situation or stiff resistance by the people in many non Western countries. As an example, we can discuss the rights of the sexual minorities, or we can discuss the legitimacy provided to live in relations in many Western countries or many other countries, or the legalization of legitimization of what we call the gay and lesbian marriages in many countries. There is no doubt in it that the plight of the sexual minorities, their grievances, their challenges, they are to be understood by the society, and the society has to respond to their grievances. But at the same time, you will find there are many cultures, there are many traditions, they are not ready to accept what is called the live in relations. They do not see any relation between men and women, or between what we call the lesbian inclinations or gay inclinations, etc. Especially the relation between men and women in many societies, that is not seen in what we call outside the an institution that is called marriage. Marriage must be solemnized, then only what is called the legality or the legitimacy is provided to the relation between the sexual relation or the biological relation between man and women. So the marriages are sacrosanct and they are solemnized between men and women. For example, Indian society, for example, Saudi Arabia, for example, Afghanistan, for example, Pakistan, and many other societies of the world. Whereas you will find that live-in relation is something that is a reality and that has been legalized by many countries of the world. In our country also, you'll find that there are judgments, in favor of live-in relations. Under these kind of circumstances, for example, you cannot imagine that live-in relation is being recognized in a country like Afghanistan, Pakistan, or other Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia, etc. So now, can we say that the countries that are not accepting the live-in relation as the legitimate relation, they are uncivilized, uncultured, or they are violating human rights? Similarly, if the countries are not ready to legalize or legitimize what is called gay and lesbian inclination, can we say that these countries are uncultured, these countries are not sensitive to the inclinations that are quite natural? The moment we say that this is there, then these countries will blame that you are trying to adopt a Eurocentric approach to the concept of human rights. And their contestation is that all human rights cannot be universal. There are exceptions and they should be accepted. So some rights are culture specific, and the rights that are deeply rooted in the societal and the cultural values of those societies, they are not ready to compromise with those rights or duties. And they say that the Eurocentric concept of human rights should not be imposed upon us. Under this kind of circumstances, we will find that the non-Western perspective of human rights becomes important. We are not pronouncing any judgment whether rights are universal or culture specific, but we all have to agree that we have to strike a balance between human rights, or what is called the universal human rights, and the cultural specificities of different societies. Otherwise, you see that if we try to superimpose rights in those societies who are resistant to these rights, that will create further problem. So this is the reason that This debate is important, and that is why the non-Western perspective of human rights is important. You know, Due to paucity of time, we cannot discuss the non-Western perspectives of human rights in a very comprehensive manner, and that is why we are not taking up the Chinese tradition of human rights, or African tradition of human rights, or American traditions, or Latin American tradition of human rights. What we are going to do, we are going to deal with only three perspectives in the non-Western perspective, that is Hindu perspective, Buddhist perspective, and then of course Islamic perspective. While discussing the evolution of the concept of human rights, we also discussed that Western perspective of human rights is inherently rights based, or sometimes it is called rights centric, whereas the non-Western perspective is duty based. This is the main difference that we identified. That in the non-Western perspective, you'll find that the duty based, it means that in the religious spiritual traditions of the non-Western countries or societies, you will find that a lot of emphasis is there on karma, dharma, duties, responsibilities, hukukul abad, hukukullah. All these things are mentioned. It means that a lot of duties that have been imposed by the religion, if all the people, or the spiritual and the religious traditions, if all the people they follow their duties, rights will be naturally taken care of. So that is why they are called duty based tradition, whereas the Western tradition is called rights based tradition. It means that in the non-Western perspective, more emphasis is given on duties. Nevertheless, we must remember that human rights and duties go together. So, human rights and duties go together, it means they are not incompatible. So, rights cannot be placed against duties, duties cannot be placed against right. It is not a binary. They are not incompatible, but they are complementary and supplementary to each other. So, that is why we have to remember that rights and duties go together. Every right that is claimed imposes a corresponding duty upon all of us. It is crucial to acknowledge that non Western perspectives, rooted in religious, philosophical, and cultural traditions, offer unique insights into the understanding of human rights. In this class, we explore the perspectives of Hinduism on human rights, highlighting its philosophical underpinnings and providing examples how its perspectives manifest in practice. As you all know that Hinduism is one of the oldest spiritual and philosophical traditions in the world. Its beauty is the accommodation of diversity within its fold. If we say that Hinduism is one of the oldest spiritual, religious, and philosophical or intellectual traditions of the world, we should also remember that within Hinduism, there have been many traditions, and that is why this diversity is the beauty. Diversity that is there within Hinduism is its beauty. That is one of the most dominant features of Hinduism. The Hindu tradition accords a central place to dharma, which denotes the right way of living. Dharma means the right way of living, the good conduct in the society. It is a comprehensive term and includes the virtue of good conduct, including rights and duties. So, dharma is an all comprehensive term in which rights and duties are included. The concept of dharma prescribes the duties of four social orders. Under Hinduism, if we see, then we find that the social structure or the social orders, The duties have been provided. Duties of number one, duties of the citizens, the duties of the citizenship, the duties peculiar to one's caste, that is, varna, the eternal family duties, that is there upon all the individuals, and the duties of those who follow the scriptures other than the Vedas, the Pasandas, those who are outside the fold of Vedas, they are also included. That is why, this is the beauty of Hinduism, the accommodation of diversity. So that is why in the Dharma you will find that the religious scripture they provide, they prescribe the duties to the citizens, duties peculiar to one's caste. For example, Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, what are their respective duties? They have been prescribed. The eternal family duties, as a family member, what are the duties of father, mother, children, all? And the duties of those who follow the scriptures other than the Vedas. It also laid down the household duties, the duties of wives, the duties of kings, and the duties of men and women. You see, again important. These duties eventually correspond to rights. These duties, because when the men and women, for example, they are discharging their duties in the family, I think domestic violence can be avoided, because they are performing their duties and peace and harmony and happiness is maintained at home. So that is why the duties that are imposed, they are important. And here what happens, that because of the performance of these duties, you will find that the rights are also implemented, the rights are also taken care of. The idea of rights in the modern sense of the term is not directly visible in Hindu culture. Whatever we have discussed, we should remember that the idea of the rights in the modern sense of the term, as we understand human rights, that is often claimed against the state, against society, even against individual. And it is said that so long as you are not harming others, there should not be any kind of interference in the affairs of man. That is, of course, Eurocentric view of human rights. But this kind of this idea of right is not available in the Hindu culture. The holy books and treatises provide many general and moral exhortations concerning rights and duties. So, these general and moral exhortations, they are basically, when we are trying to discuss the concept of human rights under Hinduism, we cannot ignore this moral and general exhortation that is there for the believers or for those who are in the fold of Hinduism, or even those who are not. So, those who are living in the society, what are the rights and the duties that have been prescribed to them? And they may be moral obligations, but they assume the status of rights because they are recognized by the society. They were recognized in the society at that time. So that is why, while trying to understand the concept of human rights under Hinduism, we have to understand in the light of these general and moral exhortations concerning rights and duties. For example, you will find that Bhagavad Gita, one of the holy books of Hinduism, mentions Karma Yoga, which is a law of cause and effect. Very interesting and very important to understand the philosophical tradition of Hinduism, that Karma Yoga has been mentioned. It postulates that every action of a being has consequences, whether instantaneous or in the future. So the karma, or the karma is so important that whatever a person does, it has its consequences, whether instantaneous or in the future. So therefore it is said that everything depends upon the karma. It expounds the necessity for the performance of work without any selfish attachment to results, to secure the welfare of the world. It is again, in the broader sense of the term, the karma is not at the individual level only. You will find this karma, when a person is following the karma, it expounds the necessity for the performance of work without any selfish attachment to results to secure the welfare of the world. You have to believe that when I am going to do my work, or the work that has been assigned to me, the duty that has been assigned to me, it is not for selfish end. But this I have to do. I should not think of that what I will get in return. So it makes you selfless, and it is also establishing cause and effect. That if your karma is bad, you are going to get bad result, and if your karma is good, you are going to get good result. Hinduism also emphasizes ahimsa, that is non-violence. It is one of the eternal features of Hinduism, that it emphasizes ahimsa, that is non-violence. The term non-violence in the light of Hinduism symbolizes love, compassion, sympathy, and care toward all living creatures. It means that many positive attributes are, the positive attributes are there for the term ahimsa or non-violence, and that is why it includes love, compassion, sympathy, and care for all living creatures. The principle of ahimsa is not narrow to include physical harm only. In its broader sense, it includes refraining from causing harm through speech, thought, and action. You see, what kind of philosophical underpinning is there so far as the term ahimsa is concerned. It is not narrow. It does not include only that a person is avoiding causing physical harm to others. It is not only physical harms. It is also, in the broader sense, it includes refraining from causing harm through speech. You cannot make a person feel inferior. If you are trying to make a person feel inferior, it means you are causing ahimsa. You are causing himsa. That is violation of the principle of ahimsa. If a person is using the words which are hurting the sentiment of others, that is again the violation of the principle of ahimsa. So whatever action a person is doing, it is not only causing physical harm. All action, for example, in the broader sense, if we are going to include this ahimsa, it means that cutting of trees, which is leading to deforestation, that is also hinsa, and that is violation of the principle of ahimsa. So it is, the speech, thought, and action, everything should be pure. And you have to read ahimsa with karma. That is again important. Father of the nation Mahatma Gandhi was the embodiment of ahimsa, as he demonstrated its practical application through non-violent resistance during India's struggle for independence from British colonial rule. Mahatma Gandhi, who is also is one of the greatest leaders of the world, and he is known for leading this country with non-violent struggle against the British colonialism. And he showed it through practice, that he never indulged in violence against British government, although there was violence from the British government, from the side of them. We should remember Jallianwala Bagh massacre and many other events. So much so that you will find after Chauri Chaura incident, Mahatma Gandhi withdrew the movement that was at its peak. So that is why, Mahatma Gandhi is known as the epitome of ahimsa, embodiment of ahimsa, and that is why he is widely respected. King Martin Luther King Jr., who proudly claims that he is a Gandhian, says that there is no longer a choice between violence and non-violence. It is between non-violence and non-existence. Unquote. You see, this is a very important statement. You know how Mahatma Gandhi inspired the great leaders of the world. So Martin Luther King Jr., who proudly claimed that he is a Gandhian, what did he say? He said that there is no longer a choice between violence and non-violence. Rather, the choice is between non-violence and non-existence. In his magnum opus, Arth Shastra, Kautilya, the great ancient Indian philosopher, discusses the Raj Dharma of the ruler. While tracing the you know human rights in Hinduism, we are not discussing only the religious scriptures. We are also discussing the Hindu civilization. The civilizational values. So that is why Kautilya is one of the great ancient philosophers, and Arthashastra is magnum opus, and he is discussing Raj Dharma in this Arthashastra. The Raj Dharma, basically, that can be understood as the obligation of the ruler or the king or head of a state. You see, at that time in ancient India, we were discussing that, during the medieval period, especially at the time of Magna Carta or during, at the time of Glorious Revolution, what was happening? That the absolutist kind of monarchy was there, and that is why the people, they wanted that some kind of restriction must be there on the ruler. Here, what is happening? That you will find that the Raj Dharma meet, it is already restricting the powers of the ruler. Through Raj Dharma, that is obligations, that is being imposed, that is in ancient India, that is being imposed on the ruler. In his book, The Welfare State, Kautilya mentions that it is the duty of the king to care for all the orphans, the aged, the helpless, and the afflicted. We find that karma and dharma have central places in Hindu tradition. While karma fosters a sense of accountability and ethical responsibility, promoting respect for the rights and dignity of others, the concept of dharma promotes the right way of living. So it means a perfect balance is maintained. So if dharma and karma, they go together, a perfect society can be maintained. Although civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights are found in the Hindu civilization, it is criticized by some for maintaining a hierarchical caste order. We should remember the Annihilation of Caste written by the father of Indian Constitution, Dr. Bhim Rao Ambedkar. The Vedas are said to champion the cause of gender equality. That also we should remember. First of all, you see that the caste hierarchy that we should discuss, then we will discuss this point. That in the Vedas, you will find that, the caste order that was maintained at that time in the Hindu civilization, if it is criticized, what we have to remember the beauty of Hinduism, that during Vedic time, you will find there was gender equality in the society. Women were not subjugated. Women were not confined within four walls of houses, which is evident from the fact that the Rig Vedic Rishas were believed to be revealed to 414 rishis, out of which 29 were female rishis. Interesting. During Vedic time, women were neither discriminated against in matters of religion nor prevented from achieving excellence in public life. Again, this is important. You see that voting right to women were given in 20th century in Europe, in the Western tradition. Here, what is happening, that the women used to attend sabhas, that is assembly, and were known as sabhavatis. It means, in ancient time, during Vedic time, you see, Women were allowed to participate in the sabhas. However, in the latter Vedic period, they stopped participating in these gatherings. And that is also a very significant aspect that we should try to understand, that what happened in our civilization, that women stopped participating in this kind of, sabhas and samitis. Now we are coming to the point why, the Hindu civilization is criticized by some people, and they say that the caste order is something, that cannot be, promoted. Here we find that Manu was an ancient lawgiver. His book Manu Smriti generates controversy for maintaining a rigid caste order. You know that the hierarchical rigid caste order is something that he tries to maintain in his book. Of course, he was a great lawgiver, but in that book, Manu Smriti, that he is maintaining this, and because of which, this Hindu civilization has been criticized. According to him, according to Manu, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas are the pure caste, and the Shudras or Ati Shudras belong to impure caste. So that he said, the pure and the impure caste, for example, the low born or high born, mean born and the high born, this kind of differences that we see. So much so that in our country there was a time when untouchability was practiced against the Shudras or the Dalits or the outcast people. All these points were made the points of criticism. However, Manu is defended by many on the grounds that his views should be understood in the context of his time and the prevailing social order that was there. He basically wanted to maintain social order and harmony, assigning a specific duties or guidelines for individuals based on their varna, that is caste, and ashrama, that is stage of life. So that is why Manu Smriti and Manu is to be are to be understood, keeping in view the prevailing circumstance under which he was writing this and he was developing this. There are some people who say, while others say that whatever you may say, but this is something that the hierarchical caste order and that too the rigidity that he is trying to maintain cannot be defended either on intellectually respectable ground or on morally respectable ground. Here, one thing is very interesting. If you see in ancient time, in many societies, for example, in the Greek society, which was of course a rational tradition, it is said, what Plato suggested in an ideal state, he said that there are three classes. The three classes, one class that is representing the reason or the wisdom, that is the class of the rulers. Then the auxiliaries or the fighters or the warriors, they represent what is called a spirit and courage. And both these classes were regarded as a guardian class. Others were, the third class was representing appetite, and this class was not allowed to have political power. That was the class of the producers. At the same time, there were, majority of the population was slave. So justification of slavery, inequality, you will find in ancient Greece that was also there. Now you see that after discussing this, the contribution of Hinduism as a religious, spiritual, and intellectual tradition is immense. It cannot be denied. Its focus on karma and dharma goes beyond the narrow understanding of human rights and duties today. The concept of Ahimsa, espoused by Hinduism, is more relevant in our contemporary world. That we have to understand, while concluding. That there may be criticism to some civilizational values, that is, I was talking about the Indian tradition, that is the Hindu tradition. But at the same time, we cannot deny the significant contribution given by Hinduism as a religious, spiritual tradition, intellectual tradition to the discourse on human rights. The its focus or emphasis on karma and dharma, that is not narrow. It is quite inclusive all comprehensive. And therefore, after karma and dharma, we should remember that the concept of ahimsa, or the idea of ahimsa that Hinduism espoused, is something that is more relevant in our contemporary world. What is happening today, for example? We are living in the age of overkill. The countries are trying to acquire sophisticated weapons, bombs, ballistic and intercontinental ballistic missiles. A lot of sophistication we have already achieved in our destructive capability. And there are people or the experts who are warning that if it continues, then a time will come that this planet, our earth, it will face the danger of destruction. So, when ahimsa, in its broader sense of the term, that right action should be there, it is not only causing physical harm. Even the thought, action, speech, expression, everything should be right, and it should not hurt others. So, therefore, I think this emphasis on ahimsa, karma, and dharma, that should be kept in mind while discussing the contribution of Hinduism to human rights. With this, we are concluding this class. In the next class, we will be dealing with the Buddhist and Islamic tradition of human rights, the contribution of Buddhism and Islam to the literature of human rights. And remember that it is not only Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity, all religions, Sikhism, Jainism, even the tribal culture, they all have contributed. But since there is paucity of time, so that is why we cannot take up all these traditions. But for the learners, it is important to develop an approach to find out what kind of contribution the great religious traditions of the world they have given to the discourse on human rights. Thank you very much.